If possible, you may not want to disclose the final user or the end marketplace. For example, we do a lot of products in the marine industry. A simple stainless steel casting might go on a multi-million-dollar yacht. And if the supplier knows that this product is for a yacht as opposed to a lawnmower, you can rest assured that the pricing is going to go up dramatically. So when you can avoid full disclosure, try to do so. Know who you're dealing with. This is a little bit tricky. What we found is because of the prevalence of the foreign trade companies or the import-export agents, you'll find that there are competitors in the U.S. and Europe that are dealing with different trading companies. However, those trading companies are all dealing from the same manufacturer. So you've got a central manufacturer that is supplying multiple competitors in the West, and that can be very dangerous. So even if you're dealing with a broker or going factory direct, it's not out of line to ask for issues of exclusivity, or at least find out what is the customer base of your potential supplier. There are probably some lawyers in the house, and they might not agree with this, but my take on it is not to rely solely on legal documents such as non-compete or non-disclosure. I like to think of a formal legal contract more of as a memo of understanding. So often the buyers from, especially where I'm from in the U.S., where there's a very legal-based society with lawyers everywhere, we tend to come over with a nice long 5 pages of very technical English and tell the supplier, if you want to do business with us, you have to sign. And unfortunately, many times the supplier might not bother to get it translated or just sees it, okay, I'll sign that in order to get the business. What's far more effective is to have a very simple but very clear memo of understanding about exclusivity or quality concerns, and have it very brief bullet points in English and Chinese, and go over it together so that the local party fully understands what your concerns are, rather than just handing over a long document and getting a signature. Well, we have enough time. I'd like to go over a quick case study. When I was asked to present, the goal was to offer some solutions or creative ways to avoid some of these knockoff issues. So I simply would like to tell about a situation that we use, and perhaps you can draw from that. Going back to a project that I mentioned before about the electronic fuel pumps for cars. So we had a customer that was we have a customer, a famous U.S. brand of fuel pumps. They're selling their products into, of course, the OEM accounts, the automakers, as well as to the NAPAs, the AutoZones. And they came to us a few years ago with the goal of finding a qualified vendor in China that could make some of their low-end labor-intensive parts in order to use the savings from that to bolster the high-end capital-intensive manufacturing that would remain in America. So with about 3 months of research, we went out in the field and we identified 20 electronic fuel pump manufacturers, narrowed it down to 5. We're successful in finding some great price reductions and legitimate quality control among these vendors. The problem was all of the vendors that we talked to were growing quite rapidly. They were very aggressive. All of them were thinking about setting up offices in America. They were going to the major trade shows in the States. They definitely had their eyes on the market. So it became very clear that if we were going to partner with these organizations, there was a substantial risk that the vendor could become the competitor in as little as we estimated a year or two. To complicate matters, in order to achieve the greatest amount of savings, the final packaging had to be done in China because it was a very labor-intensive packaging method. The problem was the customer's customers demanded that their packaging have the brand name and the pricing point. So for example, Napa fuel pump, $2.50. And it's not a wise idea to have your vendor do the final packaging and know the price that you're selling to your customer. So that threw a bit of a complication into it. We didn't want to expose the branding to the branding and the end customer to our vendor. So the first option that is probably the most common is to buy the product in bulk, ship it to your home country to a safe area, and do the quality control and packaging in that end. But in this case, because the volume was so big and the margins were so tight, that what we decided to do is set up a secure facility in China where we perform a number of services. One, the products are brought in bulk to our facility where we do 100% inbound inspection. So if there are any problems with the raw materials, it's identified on the China side. We actually shipped over the testing procedures and equipment from the U.S. and set it up in China. The second and most important is that the packaging is all done in a secure facility where only a handful of people see the big picture. So probably what makes it very special is because of the relationship is very open and transparent, we actually use our import-export license to get the VAT and then refund it at a pre-agreed amount to the customer. That almost never happens. So you have total transparency of pricing. So if you're facing these same types of security and quality control concerns, and it's fairly inexpensive, you might want to consider setting up your own, I call it a firewall, or an assembly and packaging center. Warehousing space is readily available in Dongguan and Shenzhen, just on the other side of the border. Another option, if you have multiple vendors in China, if you have a close relationship with a lot of trust with one, perhaps you can have a dedicated area within their warehouse to do the packaging and assembly, or you can outsource it to companies in China that do that 100%. So there are certainly options for protecting yourself in China, but it does require a little bit more hand-holding and legwork. But if security is an issue and you don't want to have your competitors you don't want to have your suppliers turn into competitors, it might be something to plan long-term. Kind of to wrap things up, often we will have customers that contact us and without really explaining their product, the first question is, well, how much can I expect to save in China? And the rule of thumb is 20 to 40%, just general across the board, as opposed to American and European pricing. But there are certain products that work and certain products that don't. Bottom line is, if your product is labor intensive, using readily available raw materials at medium or large volume with straightforward quality control, you're going to have a bang-up opportunity over here, and you'll probably achieve great savings. Unfortunately, if your product requires, for example, very serious quality issues, or more importantly, if it has very specific raw material that's not available in China, it might not work. For example, while the tariffs are coming down, if you have to import your raw materials into China for processing, it certainly will take a chunk out of your potential savings. So what can you expect? Probably the most attractive part about China is the low setup costs. If you're talking about injected plastics or metal stamping, your tool and die work or your setup is, from our estimates, is about half or a third of what it would be in the US or Europe. Also, another advantage during your setup period is because in China they generally run 2 or 3 shifts, operate 24/7, 7 days a week, you can get tooling done here in 15 to 30 days that would take 3 or 4 months back home. So there are some, beyond price, there are lead time issues that make China very advantageous. On the downside, there is the issue of more hand-holding in China than what you may be used to. There is a lot of work that goes into vendor coordination. So if you're on a very tight lead time and it's a new product and you have a certain launch date, you have to be very careful because it's very rare that a first production run goes off without a hitch over here, unfortunately. So there is a lot of hand-holding. Another downside to consider is, and everyone's probably thought about it, is the extended lead times for shipping. The fast boat can make it to LA in 20 days, but generally clearing customs is closer to 35 or 40 for a normal speed boat. One of the last things that I wanted to bring up was sabotage at home. We've had situations where upper management on the buy side has decided to make sourcing in China a corporate initiative.